Hey guys, so before we tear this sweet little 6300 all apart, can we just flash back for a minute to when the 6000 series came out? They replaced the 2000 series. The 2000 series was kind of a love-hate relationship. You loved them until you hated them. They were fantastic tractors until they weren't. It was not uncommon to see, 10,000 hours out of them tractors before they had much downtime or expense. But when they started to have expense, they went downhill real quick. But the 6000 came out and it was like Christmas. I mean, holy cow. That cab, when you came out of a 2755 and jumped into a 6300 with cab, you had that beautiful power quad transmission, right hand reverser. You could just click through the gears so much easier. Torquey little engines, much improved hydraulics. So you had a better cab, better transmission, better hydraulics, better overall platform for operating on. I mean, it was just like, oh my gosh, this was really exciting time to be at a John Deere dealer. And these little tractors punched way above their weight class. And so you had customers that were taking the 6400s out and doing some of the work that your 4240 and your 4040 was doing. And you're like, wow, that's a mean little machine. They were just fun and fantastic at the time, and then working on them is light years ahead. Them 2955s are great tractors, but they are not fun at all. They are not fun. They take a lot of hours to do anything on. And these little tractors here, we're going to roll this transmission out, and it usually doesn't take me too long. In a day, we make a lot of progress. And so we'll spin you around here. So I just roll the wheels off. I got my safety stands up there. I got my splitting stand down here, and then obviously the jacks. So the jacks, all they're going to do is hold the weight of the platform and the frame. The jack stand is going to hold the weight of the transmission, rear end, 3-point, all that weight. And so I'll get the hoist over here, and I'll put the hoist up top just to support the roll cage, and that's going to hold the platform. Then we're going to work on removing these 4 bolts from each ROPS mount, and then it's just a matter of pop this plate off here. We got some drive shaft and hoses and wiring up front. We got linkage for our shifting. We got cables for our selective control valves back here, and overall not that bad. Now that we have the special tool for popping them pins, it goes quite pleasantly. And like I said, in a day you can make a tremendous amount of progress. But yeah, what a wonderful platform compared to the 2000 series. Your loader mount stayed the same, for that kind of deal, but they gained a little bit of visibility. But just, I think the biggest selling item was the cab. Coming from that Soundguard cab to these square cabs, it was just, I remember being there. People but yeah, so that's my goal. So the next step is to get all these hoses indicated, cables indicated with magic markers and zip ties, and get that stuff kind of off, and work on these bolts. They are usually frozen solid into this axle housing, so I'll put the wrench on there, and if they are, we'll show you the air hammer trick. All the bolts came out like a dream, like they're supposed to, but not to disappoint. The old air hammer trick. So use the socket that fits the bolt. That way when you air hammer, you don't mushroom out the bolt head, you maintain its shape, so you can get a socket on it. But we've had others of these 6000 series where they freeze into the axle housing. And so with the air hammer on there, you just literally sit here and brap 30 seconds, a minute, and then come down here and just brap 10-15 seconds on this housing, and I guarantee 100% success, these bolts will walk right out then. Well, it's that simple. Literally just number everything, and then number the valves under there. The steering line you don't have to number because you recognize it. This other line you don't have to number because you recognize it. This guy here, this guy here. Get them out of there. We can, then we got to find some harnessing plugs, but it ain't, yeah, it's that simple. So let's get that stuff out of there. There we be. Just had to move that far. Takes 2 or 3 minutes. Easy peasy. There's the second pin out. And then I got this little chain vice grip wrench to get the pin off of the shaft. So with the double nut, I'll use a wrench to hold the double nut, hold the shaft from spinning, and then spin it loose here. Because when you thread into the pin, you're not bearing down, you know, you just thread it in by hand, you know, make sure you get in so far. If you don't have one of these things are an absolute dream, especially for stuck oil filters, just miscellaneous things like that. But a stuck oil filter is not a stuck oil filter if you have one of these. Guaranteed. If you can't get that oil filter off with this, the next tool is a grinder and a cutoff wheel, or just buy a new filter housing and be done with it. But yeah, these are a phenomenal little tool. So there we go. Like I said, we got that stuff unhooked. Here's our hydraulic lines. We got all the wiring harness. It's a little bit different through the different years here. So some of the tractors had a harness plugins up here. This one you had to unplug all your harnessing, you know, each item. There wasn't a break in the harness. I always pull that filter housing off. That filter right there, because it's 2 bolts and it comes right off. Some of the tractors, they mount on the final drive bolts. Then you just got your shift linkage and shift linkage. Then up front, you got a couple cooler hoses, a couple more senders, and the drive shaft from the engine. And then a couple bolts here to take them loose on this side. That side, the bracket is broke holds the platform down, so then we can lift it high enough to get that top pin bolt out. Then we use a special tool to pull the pins, the big pins out. And so in a few more minutes, I'll have the other 2 pins out on the other side. And we're going to start rolling it back a little bit, but then we have our 4-speed power shift lever still hooked up, and we should see that cable come in here in a little, roll it back just a little ways, and we should see that come into view there. Otherwise, we crawl underneath, get this side cleaned up, mop the floor up a little bit, and crawl underneath and disconnect it under there. But all in all, not a bad job. Just take your time and pay attention. And all right, and most of a day later, there we are. We look back in the records, and we overhauled the 4-speed not too many years ago, and the customer says the 4-speed works good. So we'll just unbolt that here, set that 4-speed. So that's your power shift 1, 2, 3, 4, and your forward reverse clutch pack, and this is your ABCD. So we'll just take this one off, set him down, and your park is also in here. And this park shaft seal leaks. That's pretty common. We've had to do this on a couple tractors just for this stupid seal. It's a lot of work for one little seal. But yeah, yep. Get this housing off, and then get your shift mechanism and kind of clean up this side a little bit of all this stuff. And then we'll get this housing off. And we got to get the front wheel drive clutch off, clutch pack, because there's a couple bolts that come up inside when that housing's off. And then we'll probably end up pulling the finals because of the drag to inspect the brakes. It's not uncommon to see bad brakes. So, yeah. Well, we ended our day here. 4-speed power quad is on the ground. Mechanical front is on the ground. The 4-speed, I had another strap on the front around the silver. So 2 straps to support it. It is literally a shift rod, a pipe, a hose, and 8 or 10, 12 bolts around the perimeter, and it just comes off. It's literally that simple. The mechanical front under there, you got 1 pipe to unhook, and then what I do is I just bring a strap right underneath the clutch, right back to here to the hoist. I don't choke it like this. I sling it, saddle it, so both ends of the strap are up there. Put a little pressure, take all my bolts off, and then lower the hoist with one hand and just balance the clutch. It's not terribly heavy, but it's clumsy, and it's an easy way to hurt a hand. And so it's just too easy to just lower it with the hoist onto the metal framework and then just lift it and set it on a piece of cardboard. Let's do this hydraulic motor. We got parts in. So let's do this hydraulic motor. I got everything cleaning. With hydraulics, one warning is as you take stuff apart, always look for a potential ball. In the machining process or somewhere else, they might have oil moving around, and they'll sometimes use a ball as a seal. And so like this rear cover had 3 of them, so just keep an eye out for that. And then like we talked about before, paint stick or center punch mark for your orientation of components. And so everything is put back in line again. I got the new seals in the front, and I tried to not take that seal 100% down, which will allow me to be on just a slightly different spot on the shaft, since that shaft has a pretty good groove right there. We'll get the lathe running next door. I think I have a motor for it, so then it's just a matter of rigging that motor up for that lathe. But if the other motor fails, we might braze it up, turn it down a little bit, braze it up, and then finish the brass. You know what I mean. But that's for a different video. At this point, everything's rinsed off, and I took since we are dealing with a hydraulic component, I washed my table first, and you can see I have clean fluid. So I scrubbed the table here off, and then you're kind of just flood rinsing everything. And yeah, so we're good to go there. We got clean towels to put it on. Before we drive our seal in, we wash our hammer. We wash our driver, because we don't want to hit them and knock dirt in there. And so it's hydraulics. Take 22 hours to do one little step, and that's okay. You just don't want contamination in there. So at this point, it is we have to install the new bearing. Install our new bearing, and then our sleeve, our rear bearing, and then we can put our shaft in and the gyrotor assembly, and then just stack it up. Boom, 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 boom. All right, so I got the one race down into that washer. It looks like just a normal washer, but it's a hardened washer, and it becomes a race for that bearing. So the 2 washers kind of sandwich that bearing to create a bearing. And there's one of these bearings on each end for thrust loads in and out of the motor. And so I'll cover this guy up with some grease, drop him in, and then put a little grease on this, drop him in, and that kind of helps hold stuff in place. And then you know it's lubed. I mean, it obviously is a hydraulic motor, so it ain't turning till hydraulic oil gets there, but it still gives us a half a second of rotation. But I like the grease because it helps just hold stuff in place. So we'll get that stuff lubed up and start driving bearings. Well, like we said, there ain't a whole lot of components. Once we had the bearing and seal down in front, and we put the two bearings and the sleeve in the middle, then it's just set this collar on and set your gyro assembly on. And then there's a fill plug here. We can't forget this little feller. And then this plate, we want it so our ball sides come up. And the nice thing is I painted offset. So if you flip this around, my gasket moved, but if you flip it around to line up the holes, your paint is way off. And on this one, you have the balls that go in there. So obviously you're not going to put the balls upside down because they're just going to drop inside. But on some of the other ones, if you're questioning if you're upside down or not, see if I can get this back in place. If you're questioning if you're right side, like, oh crap, what way did that one go? Flip it upside down and look at the bolt holes and see how they work out. But yeah, let me re-clean this piece, and well, he's good. I don't know, honestly, what life is left in this motor. We might get it back together to see that the motor is just shot. That's always a possibility. A little grease in there. And then on this feller, I wipe. I'm just hitting a few spots. That's old O-ring. With grease. I got a little bit excessive on my finger, but and that will hold the next packing. Yay. Yay. Now that will hold that. Now don't forget the balls while we're here, because it's too easy to not finish one step and go to the next step, only to have to take the next step back off to do the one step again. Now we orientate him, change hands. And he sits like that. Bing, bang, boom. We'll zip the bolts in and see, can we turn the shaft or not? Actually, at this point, you could, I might take this back off, but we can also pour, yeah, I'll wait. We can pour a Dixie cup of oil in our port here and roll the motor over and tip it, tip it down so the oil gets in there a little bit. But whatever, let's torque these bolts down, and grade 8 3/8, so we'll probably be 35 to 45 pounds, and let's see how it goes. Let's see if we did an okay job. It spins, and it spins the other way. Ugh, got oil in my hand. I'm going home. That's it. I'm out.